Aaliya didn't ask the question again. Not directly. But her silence afterward said more than words ever could. The next few minutes passed in a blur. I focused on the fence, tightening screws, checking alignment, anything to avoid looking at her. But I could feel her presence like a weight in the air, steady and warm. She didn't move, just sipped her lemonade slowly. Like she had all day to wait for an answer I wasn't sure I had. Truth was, I didn't have a girlfriend. I hadn't had one since Meher, and I ended things almost 2 years ago. Not because of a dramatic fallout, but because life had simply pulled us in different directions. We weren't each other's forever, just a chapter in a book we were still learning to write. But what lingered after wasn't heartbreak. It was fear. Fear that starting again would mean feeling that kind of vulnerability all over again. Aaliya didn't know any of that. But something about her gaze made it feel like she could see every unsaid thing written across my face. She finally stood, brushing a leaf off her kurta. "You don't have to answer," she said softly. "I just thought. I don't know. You seemed like someone who might understand the quiet kind of loneliness." That stopped me. "I do," I said, almost before thinking. Then quieter. "Maybe a little too well." She nodded, not in pity but in recognition. Over the next few days, the fence remained unfinished, like both of us were leaving it open on purpose. I kept finding excuses to walk by. An extra nail, a loose board. And she always seemed to be outside, tending to her plants or sketching quietly in a notebook. We didn't talk much, but when we did, it was never small talk. She told me she moved to this old house to escape the city noise after losing her father. Said she needed to breathe in silence for a while. I told her I wasn't sure what I was doing with my life. Fixing fences, fixing nothing. We never said it out loud, but we were both trying to fix something inside ourselves. The fence still stood half-finished, but now it wasn't the only thing broken. I couldn't stop thinking about what Samir said. "I'm her fiancé." The words echoed louder than any hammer blow I'd driven into that damn wood. But it wasn't his arrogance that unsettled me. It was Aaliya's silence. She hadn't denied it. That night I barely slept. Her sketchbook, the one she always kept close, was now lying under my coffee table. She must have left it behind in a rush. I shouldn't have opened it, but something told me there were things she hadn't said out loud. On the last page, in hurried, angry charcoal strokes, were the words, "He doesn't get to own my story anymore." Morning came with gray clouds and heavier thoughts. I stood outside, hoping for a glimpse of her. Nothing. Her blinds stayed shut. No music. No humming. The house looked as guarded as she did when he showed up. Later, while I was packing up my tools, her friend showed up. A tall woman in jeans and a dupatta half slipping from her shoulder. Zoya. I'd met her once before, when they had chai under the tree, laughing like old schoolgirls. This time she wasn't smiling. "You're the neighbor, right? Rohaan?" she asked, serious. I nodded. "She told me about you," Zoya said. "She also told me Samir's been stalking her. Messaging, calling from new numbers, sending gifts. Yesterday was the first time he showed up unannounced. He always had a way of making her feel like she owed him." I clenched my fists. "Why didn't she say anything?" "Because she's tired of being seen as fragile," Zoya replied. "And maybe, she wasn't sure if you were going to stay." I felt that hit. Deep. Then came the sound of shattering glass. We both turned toward Aaliya's house. One of her upstairs windows had broken from the inside. I didn't wait. I ran. The door was unlocked. "Aaliya!" I called out, heart racing. No answer. Just silence and the wind pushing through the broken glass. Then a voice, shaky, from upstairs. "Rohaan." "I'm okay. Please don't come in." I paused halfway up the stairs. Her voice sounded like she was crying but didn't want to be seen that way. "I just dropped a frame," she said. Zoya appeared behind me, breathless. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did she. We sat in her small living room. Aaliya curled up on the corner of the couch, her knees drawn to her chest, wrapped in a soft blanket that smelled faintly of rose oil and fear. I sat across from her, one eye on the front door, the other on my phone. Samir hadn't messaged again. But the silence was worse than the threats. Zoya stayed for a while, trying to act normal, making tea, humming old Coke studio songs under her breath, but even she couldn't hide the tension. Before leaving, she pulled me aside and whispered, "He won't stop on his own." You need to step in. I nodded. Aaliya hadn't said much since the message, but her eyes said everything. She was exhausted, not just physically but emotionally, like she'd been holding herself together with invisible thread, and now it was finally unraveling. I hate that I ever let him into my life, she said quietly, staring into her untouched cup of tea. And I hate that I'm still scared of him. I sat down beside her. You don't have to be scared alone anymore. Her eyes flicked toward me. Why are you still here, Rohaan? Because you never asked me to leave. She didn't reply, just leaned her head gently against my shoulder. The kind of touch that didn't beg for romance, just safety. And that broke me more than anything. The next morning it happened. While I was outside grabbing the toolbox from my car, a sleek black SUV pulled up at the curb. The window rolled down. Samir. I didn't recognize him at first. Hair slicked back, expensive shirt, sunglasses that hid the calculation in his gaze. She's not your problem, man, he said casually, stepping out. She's fragile. She does this, gets confused, creates stories. Leave, I said firmly. He smirked. Or what? You'll hit me with a wrench. I clenched my jaw, not because I was scared, but because I knew people like him. Men who twisted kindness into weakness, who wore confidence like armor to cover their emptiness. She doesn't want to see you. She's mine, he said, his voice suddenly colder. You think you know her? You've known her for what, weeks? I gave her years. Years of control, I snapped. Years she's still trying to recover from. And then Aaliya stepped outside, barefoot, trembling, but there. I'm not yours, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Not anymore. He turned toward her, stunned. You think this guy's going to save you? He doesn't know the real you. She took a step forward past me. No, but he listens. He doesn't try to own me. Samir laughed bitterly, but there was a flicker of panic behind it. He hadn't expected this. Not her strength. Not her defiance. Not this moment of truth. You're going to regret this, he said, stepping closer. That's when I moved in between them, gently placing my hand out to stop him. That's enough. He looked at me, really looked, and for the first time I saw it. Fear. Not mine. His. He knew he was losing control. And nothing scared him more than a woman who no longer feared him. He took one last glance at her, shook his head, and walked back to the car. The SUV roared off down the street. Aaliya didn't move. Just stood there, frozen, as if afraid that the moment would shatter if she breathed too hard. I turned to her, and she fell into my arms. Her sobs weren't loud. They were the kind that came from a deep place, where pain had been buried too long. I held her, not trying to stop them, just letting them pass through us like a storm that needed to break. Later, when she could finally speak, she whispered. He used to say no one would ever love me the way he did. I brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. He was right. Someone else will love you better. In the days after Samir left, Aaliya began to smile again. Small fleeting moments like light through cracks. She was still quiet, still guarded, but she didn't flinch when I reached for her hand. She even laughed one evening when I tried and failed to make parathas from scratch. We were rebuilding something. Not fast. Not perfect. But honest. So when her phone rang that Tuesday evening, I didn't think much of it. She was inside. I was out on the porch fixing the last panel of the fence. Her voice carried softly through the open window. Hello. Yes, he's here. What? That's not possible. Silence. My hand stilled. She came out seconds later, face pale, her expression unreadable. Aaliya? I asked. Her lips parted, but the words didn't come out. Finally, she handed me the phone. It's for you. Confused, I took it. Rohaan, said a deep voice on the other end. We've been trying to reach you for weeks. My name is Inspector Danish with the Lahore CID. The air thickened. I'm sorry to intrude, but your name came up in an investigation involving an individual we believe may be targeting multiple women under false identities. Aaliya Khan is one of them. What? I choked out. The voice remained calm but urgent. We have reason to believe that Samir isn't acting alone. There's a network. He wasn't just an obsessive ex, he's connected to something larger. He's been under surveillance for months. And we believe you've been in contact with someone who might be a part of it, possibly unknowingly. I froze. This woman, he continued, Zoya. She visited Aaliya recently, didn't she? My grip tightened. She's her friend. She's been helping. The inspector hesitated. That's the thing. We traced several IP logs and device pings from a secure server linked to Samir's online activity. One of the numbers used to track Aaliya was Zoya's. Everything slowed. The teacups. The comforting smiles. The advice whispered in corners. All of it, maybe none of it was real. I know this is hard, the inspector said. But we need to find Zoya. If you can keep Aaliya safe and delay her contact with her, we'll send a team immediately. I looked at Aaliya, standing just a few feet away watching me, and I couldn't say it. Not yet. When I ended the call, she asked, Rohaan, what's going on? Elite. Wrong number. Nothing important. But guilt stabbed me in the chest like a splinter under the skin, because for the first time, I wasn't just protecting her. I was protecting her from the truth. That night she seemed lighter. She made chai. We talked. She even touched my cheek when I made a joke about retiring from construction. But under the softness I kept seeing shadows. I excused myself for a walk, phone in hand. My mind raced. Could Zoya have been planted? Could she have been feeding Samir details all along? Her arrival the same day he showed up couldn't be a coincidence. Her insistence that I get involved, that I protect Aaliya, suddenly felt designed. That's when I saw the text come through. From Aaliya's phone. The next morning everything was too quiet. Aaliya was humming again while folding laundry, as if she didn't know her world was about to tilt. I wanted to believe that peace had returned, but the text from Zoya haunted every moment. I had forwarded it to Inspector Danish overnight. He replied just before dawn. Keep her inside today. We move at noon. So I pretended everything was normal. I fixed her kitchen cabinet door. She made lemon tea. We talked about repainting the porch. Every word was a lie wrapped in comfort. When Zoya texted Aaliya that she'd be stopping by just to check in, I smiled and nodded like it didn't feel like a trap. Aaliya glanced at me. You okay? I nodded too fast. Just tired. But inside I was a storm. At exactly 12:05 the bell rang. I stepped forward but Aaliya beat me to the door. It's just Zoya, she said gently. You look like you've seen a ghost. Zoya stood outside, holding a basket of homemade biscuits, dressed in her usual soft blues, hair tied loosely, smile innocent. If I didn't know what I knew, I'd believe she was the best friend in the world. But her eyes flicked past Aaliya to me, and something cold passed between us. She knows. We sat in the living room. Zoya offered tea. She spoke sweetly, asked how Aaliya was feeling, complimented the curtains. But I saw her texting under the table. Aaliya excused herself to take a call. And that's when Zoya leaned in. I always wondered if you'd figure it out, she said softly, still smiling. You're smarter than Samir gave you credit for. I didn't blink. Why? Because she wasn't supposed to move on. That's what this was always about. Control. Punishment. Closure, he said. My voice was low. You used her. She's stronger than you think, Zoya said, as if that justified anything. But she needed to break completely before she could rebuild. Samir just made it happen. I stood, jaw clenched. It ends now. She didn't argue. It already has. A loud knock interrupted us. Police. Aaliya came out, startled. What's happening? Before I could answer, 2 officers entered and asked Zoya to come quietly.
I'm sorry, he whispered to Aaliya.
I didn't want you to find out like this. Zoya smiled, calm as ever. You're lucky, Aaliya. Most people never find out who their real enemies are. As they led her away, Aaliya collapsed onto the couch, hands shaking. I don't understand, she whispered. She was all I had after. I knelt in front of her. You have me. She looked at me like someone drowning who had just realized they were safe. But why would she? The house was quiet again, but not empty. Zoya had been arrested. Samir, too, had been detained once the authorities uncovered how deep his manipulation ran. The emotional aftermath was heavy, like dust finally settling after a long, cruel storm. But Aaliya was standing now, not hiding. Her hands no longer trembled when she reached for the kettle. Her eyes, though still shadowed by what she'd lived through, no longer darted around the room in fear. She was reclaiming her story. We sat on her porch a few days later, watching the sun sink below the city skyline. The old wooden fence, the one I was fixing when everything began, stood complete, freshly painted. Solid. "Rohaan," she said softly, breaking the silence between us. "Do you ever think we met by accident?" I looked at her and smiled. "I used to." She raised an eyebrow. "But now I think, maybe the universe knew we both needed someone to believe in." She nodded, tears glistening but not falling. "I didn't think I could trust again." "I know," I whispered. There was no grand kiss. No music swelling in the background. Just fingers finding fingers, breath sinking, hearts steadying together. Healing, I realized, didn't always look like a straight line. It twisted and paused, it relapsed and rose. But it never stopped moving if you had someone to walk it with. Over the next few weeks, life found a new rhythm. Aaliya started volunteering at a women's center, quietly helping others find their voices. I opened a small local workshop. Nothing fancy, just honest work that kept my hands and heart occupied. We laughed more, slept better, dreamed a little. One afternoon, I found her sketching by the fence again. She looked up at me, grinning. "You know," she said, "this fence is kind of where everything changed." I leaned on it beside her. "Yeah. And you were the first person who ever asked me if I had a girlfriend." She giggled. "You never really answered that." I took a breath, stepped closer. "I didn't then," I said. "But I think I do now." She bit her lip, that same nervous flutter in her eyes from months ago. "Are you asking or telling me?" "Both." And this time she kissed me first. Sparkle's moral takeaway. Healing doesn't always happen alone. Sometimes the right person walks into your broken world. Not to fix you, but to help you remember how to rebuild. Forgiveness, trust, and love don't come easily after betrayal, but they can come back when nurtured with truth, patience, and compassion. White heavy checkmark. Final viewer engagement prompt. Did you enjoy the story? Let us know in the comments how it made you feel. What kind of stories would you like to hear next? Romance, suspense, healing journeys, or something else? Your feedback shapes the stories we tell next. Clipboard video description, YouTube optimized title. She wasn't the end of my story. She was the beginning. Heartfelt romantic thriller ending description. In this deeply emotional finale, Aaliya and Rohaan finally find peace after months of manipulation, betrayal, and silent pain. As secrets unravel and justice is served, two broken hearts come together in a quiet but powerful way. Join us for this unforgettable conclusion to a romantic suspense series that proves love isn't always loud, but it's always strong. Speech balloon. Did this ending hit you right in the heart? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional YouTube stories that stay with you long after the video ends. Hashtag love heals, hashtag romantic suspense, hashtag YouTube drama, hashtag South Asian storytelling, hashtag emotional healing, hashtag betrayal to redemption, hashtag healing together, hashtag true love wins. Disclaimer. This content contains mature emotional themes and is suitable for general audiences. No explicit content is included. She wasn't just watching you, I said. They were using me to get close to. This wasn't just about the past. It was about control. And they lost it. Tears fell quietly. And then she did something I didn't expect. She pulled me in, kissed me, soft, real, and trembling. It wasn't a fairy tale kiss. It was a release. A relief. A thank you. A beginning. That evening, the sun dipped low behind the hills, casting orange light across her front yard. She stood barefoot on the porch, arms folded, watching the sky change. "I think I forgot how to breathe for a long time," she said quietly. I stepped beside her. "Want to remember now?" She looked at me. "Only if you'll stay." I smiled. I wasn't planning on going anywhere. But it wasn't Aaliya who sent it. "Zoya. He doesn't know. She trusts him too much. But we'll get what we need before it's over. Then he'll wish he never crossed you." I read it 3 times before it sank in. They weren't just watching Aaliya. They were watching me. I ran back to the house, heart thundering. Aaliya was asleep on the couch, a book in her lap. The lamp beside her flickered, casting soft golden light on her peaceful face. And I realized I wasn't just protecting her from her past anymore. Now I had to protect her from a future she didn't see coming. And I was running out of time. But I knew. It wasn't about the frame. It was about him. And it was about everything she'd been holding in since the day she let me into her garden, and maybe even before. She finally opened the door a crack. Her eyes were red. Not just from tears, but from a quiet war inside her that she was losing. "I didn't tell you about him," she whispered. "Because I didn't want to be someone who always came with baggage." "You're not baggage," I said softly. "You're brave. And you deserve peace." She nodded, but the doubt on her face was clear. "He's not going to stop, Rohaan. I moved cities, changed numbers. It doesn't matter. He keeps finding me." I swallowed hard. "Then let me stand with you. You don't have to face him alone." But before she could answer, her phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. From Samir. And then one evening as I was packing up my tools, I caught her staring again. Not at me, but at the fence between our homes. Do you ever feel like the things you build are really just walls to hide behind? It was the first time I realized this wasn't just about us. This was about the lives we'd both led before this moment. I wanted to ask her what she was running from, but I wasn't sure I had the right to. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to pretend she wasn't scared, but then I'd have to admit that I was too. She broke the silence. I didn't mean to make it awkward asking that question. It just slipped out. I smiled, finally meeting her eyes. Maybe it needed to. She smiled back, but there was something guarded in it. Like she was trying to hold back the part of herself that wanted to believe in someone again. The air between us wasn't romantic in a movie scene kind of way. It was heavier. More fragile. The kind of tension that builds when two people see a mirror in each other, but aren't ready to look too closely. Still, I knew one thing for certain. She wasn't just a neighbor anymore. And the fence I was fixing? It wasn't the only thing I was rebuilding. But what would happen if I knocked, and she didn't open the door? I didn't expect my Sunday morning to start with a hammer, a rusted gate, and a stranger asking about my love life. But there I was, sleeves rolled up, sweat on my brow, and the smell of jasmine drifting through her garden as she leaned against the doorway with that curious look in her eyes. Aaliya Khan, late 20s, fiercely independent, recently moved into the old house next to mine. She had the kind of presence that made silence feel comfortable, and conversation feel dangerous. Not because of what she said, but how easily she made you forget to guard your heart. I was just doing a favor. Fixing the broken wooden fence between our yards. Nothing more. At least, that's what I told myself when she brought out cold lemonade and sat across from me on the steps, barefoot and unapologetically direct. Then, without any warning, she asked, "Do you have a girlfriend?" The question hit harder than the nail I'd just bent in frustration. I looked up. Her eyes weren't teasing. They were searching. As if the answer meant more to her than she was letting on. I could have laughed it off. I could have asked why she cared. But instead, I froze. Half-finished fence behind me, and something even more unfinished beginning between us. What started as a quiet act of neighborly kindness was quickly turning into something neither of us was ready to name, but both of us were feeling. And the real question wasn't whether I had a girlfriend. It was I ready to let someone in again?